Tonight on Nation to Nation, the people of Kashechewan are on the move again. Rising waters are expected to flood the First Nation in northern Ontario.
The emergency teams working with them, they're excellent. There's a lot of commitment here, but nobody should ever have to leave their home, certainly not every single year, because government doesn't have a plan.
And it's not just a federal government problem. Ontario can't forget it's a signatory on Treaty 9.
They continue playing that jurisdictional ping pong on the lives of our people, especially in the First Nation communities such as Kashechewan, is not acceptable anymore.
And the Manitoba MLA wants to make the jump to federal politics and run for Trudeau's Liberal Party.
Voice recognized and heard in this era of truth and reconciliation that the Liberal government has brought in, that Justin Trudeau has brought in.
I'm Todd Lamourant, and welcome to Nation. The first of many members of Kashechewan are being evacuated from their community once again. It happens every year as the Northern Ontario First Nation sits on a floodplain. They'll be flown to various parts of Ontario until the waters subside. But does this need to happen every year? NDP MP Charlie Angus says it doesn't, and in fact the Trudeau government has agreed to help and move the community to higher ground. But the price tag could be as high as $1 billion. Welcome to Nation, Mr. Angus.
Thank you for having me on again.
So what's happening in Kashechewan right now?
The evacuation for the spring flooding is underway, with flights taking people to Timmins, Kapuskasing, Cornwall, Thunder Bay. This is now, the evacuations are an annual event because the engineering reports on the dike wall that's supposed to protect the community show us that this doesn't meet any safety standards, and the engineers say it puts the community at, quote, intolerable risk. So with the flooding season about to begin on the Albany River, the only option right now is to disrupt school, take people out of their homes, fly them across Ontario until it's safe enough to return.
Community members are finding this year harder than past years. Why is that? In fact, you used the phrase mass trauma.
Every year is extremely traumatic if you have to pack up, your most important worldly possessions, to take your children, or if they're sick elders, and you have to fly to another community where you have no connection. And then you don't know what you're returning to, because some years we have catastrophic flooding where homes are destroyed and buildings are damaged. I think what makes this year worse was there was a real sense in 2017 when we signed the new agreement with the government that maybe the Trudeau government was serious about following through. Certainly last fall, when the youth basically staged a rebellion and said they would not go back into the broken down portables that they were being educated in, and demanded a proper school. And we met with Minister Philpott, and there was a sense from the minister that we couldn't get a brand new school in Kashechewan just yet because they said, we don't want to put a school on a floodplain. We want to move you to the high ground. Well, it's clear in this budget there was no money to move people to the high ground, and people are feeling like one more time they've been the government's misrepresented the facts to them and lied to them, and they're frustrated, and there's a lot of anger.
There's a modular school being put in there in September, and homes are being built that can be easily moved. Doesn't that indicate a long-term commitment by Ottawa?
Well, I think what we see from the fact that we have a modular school is that modular is not a permanent school, but it was done on an emergency basis. But the problem with Indian Affairs is anything that's temporary becomes permanent. We accepted the government's argument last fall about the commitment to building a proper full school that the children deserve in the community on a floodplain. If the community was going to be moved, we recognized, okay, we will put up, with a temporary school. But at the time, the message was sent to the government very clearly: you better follow through. You better be honest with people. And now we've got a modular school, and we're glad that we have something better than the portables. But what we don't have is any vision for moving this community off the floodplain, out of the danger, out of the traumatic experiences that they have to go through year in, year out, and finally move the community to the high ground so we can have a long-term sustainable future for the people of Kashechewan.
The Trudeau government agreed to help in 2017, but is the price tag of perhaps $1 billion unpalatable this close to election?
Well, I think I asked the Canadian people, how many millions of dollars do we need to spend on putting a Band-Aid on a septic wound? The Harper government spent $15 million on a dike wall that engineering reports say cannot be made structurally safe no matter how much money you spend on it. In that time, they probably spent about $70 million in evacuations and repairing flood damages. We have a whole new subdivision in Kashechewan on the site of the last subdivision that was destroyed by flood. What happens this year? If catastrophic flooding hits the Albany River, are we going to have to rebuild those houses? Canadians get it. This is not sustainable. You're spending millions every year evacuating people, millions every year doing repairs to houses that are basically living on a swamp. That's not a sustainable solution. And the longer we delay, the more expensive this eventual move will get. This community has a plan. They want to do it in the long term. They want to do it so that people are involved, and we're actually training people. This could be a vision statement for how we move forward in the 21st century, or it could just be business as usual of Ottawa wanting to nickel and diming communities that are at dangerous levels of risk.
There's been talk by Kashechewan Chief Leo Friday they'll go it alone and move themselves, but how realistic could that be?
Well, the community is very, very frustrated. I've been in community meetings where people have been very mistrustful of government promises, and we assured them this time, honest, we believe things are going to happen. I understand Chief Friday's wanting to begin the move, but, realistically, we need a coherent budget to be able to begin moving. People are ready. They know where they've always known the place on the territory where it would be safe, where we could build proper infrastructure. This is a community that will be a big part of making that future happen, but they need a partner. And right now that partner is the Trudeau government, and they, quite frankly, have just been like any other government of broken promises and empty words. It's not acceptable, not in 2019.
Have there been any studies, Mr. Angus, done to see what impact these yearly evacuations have on community members?
I don't know of a study that has been done. I think it would be very helpful. It is very traumatizing for the families. It's traumatizing for the young people. They don't look forward to spring because they know spring means uncertainty. Spring means losing school, and spring may mean losing their home. That's not what we should be feeling when we see the temperature change and the sound of the geese coming. It is traumatic on a number of levels. Right now we have, children being put up in hotels across the north and in Cornwall. And, the emergency teams working with them, they're excellent. There's a lot of commitment here. But nobody should ever have to leave their home, certainly not every single year, because government doesn't have a plan.
What do you think of the irony of now independent MP Jane Philpott last week asking the government about a long-term funding commitment for Kashechewan?
Well, we were looking to Jane Philpott to be one of our champions, and she seemed to have certainly understood the importance of that move. We built a good relationship with her. The decision of Justin Trudeau to kick her out of his caucus certainly surprised and shocked people in our region. We will continue to work with Jane Philpott. She's been in Kashechewan. She's seen what things are like on the ground. Justin Trudeau hasn't seen it. Seamus O'Regan hasn't seen it. And certainly Bill Morneau, the finance minister, has no clue what it's like for people who are living on that floodplain. So we will work with whoever allies we have, and I'm hoping we can continue working with Jane Philpott.
And what about Ontario's Conservative government? Should they have a role in this issue?
Well, the Ontario government always likes to pretend that these are federal issues, but when Treaty 9 was signed, and people should always remember this, Treaty 9 of which Kashechewan is part of, it transferred some of the richest hydro, mineral, lumber wealth in the world and transformed Ontario into an economic powerhouse. It's not acceptable that the Ford government pretends that people in the James Bay region, people in Treaty 9 region are somehow not part of the province of Ontario, not entitled to security and safety as every other citizen. So I think the Ford government has certainly been failing the people of Kashechewan and the people of the North, and I would like to see Mr. Ford go to Kashechewan and see for himself what the condition of fellow Ontarians are like when you get further north than Barrie.
Thank you for once again taking some time to talk to me, Mr. Angus.
Thank you so much.
After the break, we speak to NDP member of Ontario's provincial parliament, Saul Mamakwa, about Kashechewan. Welcome back. We're sticking with Kashechewan and the ongoing problems there. And it's not just a federal issue, according to our next guest. NDP member of Ontario's legislature, Saul Mamakwa, believes there's more that the provincial government can do. Mamakwa has also been pushing the Ford government on other issues affecting First Nations in Ontario. He's the NDP's critic on Indigenous affairs and reconciliation. Welcome to Nation to Nation, Mr. Mamakwa.
I'm glad to be here, Todd. Miigwech.
Now, some say the problems in Kashechewan are a federal issue, but you believe the provincial government should be doing more. What is that?
We have to understand that Ontario, the province, is a signatory to Treaty 9, which is Kashechewan is part of. So to continue playing that jurisdictional ping pong on the lives of our people, especially in the First Nation community, such as Kashechewan, is not acceptable anymore. Like, I mean, this is, this is Ontario, this is 2019, and we need to bring back the responsibility and accountability back to the province of Ontario.
Mr. Mamakwa, I know that your NDP colleague Guy Bourgoin accused Ford of obsessing over Toronto civic politics at the expense of the North, and especially of getting a new school there in Kashechewan. But how do you get them to start focusing on more northern issues?
Certainly, I know that sometimes we forget about the issues that are in the north, and the colleagues. There's 124 MPPs in Ontario, and sometimes the colleagues don't understand what's happening in the north. And I know, with the budget cuts, like, say, for example, Indigenous Affairs, MNRF, and Ministry of Northern Development and Mines, it seems that they want to, develop. They cut these ministries, but they want access to the resources and the development that in the north, which kind of makes sense in a sense whereby does not make sense. I mean, whereby they're cutting back, but they want resources, and sometimes they don't understand the issues, the humanity of these issues, the unnecessary suffering I spoke about, and also the needless death that's happened. And sometimes it's if this happened anywhere in Ontario, that would be not acceptable. The status quo could be construed as normal and acceptable in our region, in our communities, but would be unacceptable anywhere else in Canada.
Now, there was nothing in the federal budget to do anything about relocating Kashechewan. And in the Ontario budget, as you mentioned earlier, the Indigenous Affairs Department, its budget was slashed in half. I guess, how cynical are you at this point?
When we annual evacuations cost, at between 18 million and 22 million, and if we do this for the next 10 years, that's $250 million. And when are we going to wake up and make sure that we start moving this community? It's about the health of this community. It's about the wellness of this community, and we need to fast track some of these processes. I understand there was an agreement, that was a tripartite agreement between Canada, Ontario, and also the First Nation, and we need to fast track the addition to reserve process, and also connecting making that road to where the higher level land, and start looking at the surveying and building airports. Like, those are some of the costs that we need to start looking at, and to do the initial work. And we cannot keep on putting the communities and families in this predicament that they're in every year, and that's not acceptable.
You also mentioned talk about the province wants the resources in the north, especially the Ring of Fire, what's known as the Ring of Fire. So there's been talk of repealing the Far North Act to reduce red tape and make and restrictions on northern development. What are your constituents saying about this possibility?
Communities, First Nations say, we are not red tape, and And then also what the communities are saying as well is, far north or northern Ontario is not open for business unless we as First Nations are in the driver's seat or at the decision-making table, or that we're fully engaged and involved in the process of development in the north. And without that, there's no development there. Premier Ford can bring his bulldozer, but without that, without consultation, without working with the First Nations, that will not happen. And that's what I'm hearing. And I think that's the position that I've been taking in the House and talking to ministers and also the Premier on it.
Mr. Memakwa, I want to thank you for your time today.
Okay, Kachamiga.
We'll have an interview with a Liberal MLA in Manitoba who wants to jump to federal politics. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Judy Klassen is used to being a giant killer. In 2016, she ran as a Liberal in the Manitoba provincial election, where she defeated longtime NDP MLA Eric Robinson. Now Klassen has longtime NDP Member of Parliament Nikki Ashton in her sights. She wants to jump to federal politics and is seeking the Liberal nomination for the Churchill-Kiwantanuk-Aski riding, which Ashton has held since 2008, and where 75% of the population is Indigenous. Ms. Klassen, welcome to Nation to Nation.
Thank you.
First off, why make the jump to federal politics after only a little over 2 years in provincial politics?
If you listen to the responses that I get in the legislature, my questions are largely regarding my people in the north, and the majority of the responses I get is go seek help from your federal cousins, basically telling me that Indigenous people's only place in the political realm is federal, and so I feel that I would be a stronger voice if I made that leap.
And you put that as a failure to the Pallister Conservative government?
Yes.
And why do you think that is?
Because we know that there are federal transfer payments. Every Manitoban should count when our province gets money. Everybody is accounted for, but when the spending dollars come out, we have almost 20% of the population in Manitoba is Indigenous, and our First Nation communities rarely see any of that associated funding coming into their communities to help them combat their multitude of issues.
So what is it about the job Nikki Ashton has done that makes you think you'll be a better representative of that particular riding?
Well, because the riding itself is 70% Indigenous, and I've lived through the experiences that most of my people have gone through. I've grew up without running water. Our community only got running water in 2000. The next year I opened up a business in my First Nation. I've lived the experience, and I continue to live through the experiences of what my people are facing day in and day out.
So why do you believe yourself and Justin Trudeau, for that matter, can get better results for Northern Manitoba?
This decision wasn't an easy one to make. I was very secure in my non-political life. I don't consider myself a politician. I consider myself a leader. I'm trying to lead my people out of poverty. And a lot of the leadership in these communities have approached me, and a lot of my people, a lot of my constituents especially, have asked me to take this leap. And so I'm willing to do that. And the primary reason is because we're scared. We're scared of, if we see how this PC government works provincially, and from previous experience and knowledge from beforehand, we know that the PC government is not our friend.
But why federal politics then?
Because the answers I get in that house that I sit in here in Manitoba continuously, go see your federal cousins, go see your federal cousins. It's basically saying that this is not my place. You know, I fought very hard to get into a building that wasn't designed for thinking of my people and respecting my people. So I see that I'll be able to make that voice recognized and heard in this era of truth and reconciliation that the Liberal government has brought in, that Justin Trudeau has brought in.
Of course, there's been a lot of criticism of that recently, and especially through the experiences of what happened to Jody Wilson-Raybould. So that her experience didn't give you pause as an Indigenous woman to keep running for the Liberals?
I thought that, you know, much respect is owed. She laid those footprints for Indigenous women. She entered that house and made it real for me that it could be a possibility for me to enter, you know, an institution that again wasn't designed for our people. And so I'm very grateful for those footsteps she's laid, and I'd like to carry those footsteps forward.
But you're not worried that something similar might happen to you if you speak, you're in a position where you speak your truth to power, and what happened to her might happen to you?
I'm not worried about that.
There are concerns that when you do jump to federal politics, that it might, the Liberals in Manitoba could lose official party status because they'll go from 4 seats to 3 seats. Does that give you any pause of concern for your party in Manitoba?
I'm very, the party has never been stronger than it has. You know, I'm very aware of that. I know that my seat will not be lost. We will definitely still have more than party status when Pallister calls the election.
And a week ago, there was still no challengers for the April 24th nomination meeting. Is that still the case?
For my riding, that's correct. That's what I've heard.
Okay, so there's a good chance you will be the Liberal nominee in the upcoming election.
Correct. And when the date comes that we know, then we can formulate a plan of action after that.
Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to that, and we'll certainly be coming back, I'm sure, to talk to you about that when the election campaign gets going. Ms. Klassen, thank you for talking to me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Well, that's it for our show tonight, but if you missed any part of it or a past episode, you can check out our podcasts. Go to aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Todd Lamoran. Thanks for watching.